Hi, I'm Rosie. Welcome to my podcast called Yoga Pose. I'm Yoga Pose. My family used to call me Rosie Pose. I feel like the nickname made me destined to become a yoga teacher. These episodes are a chance for me to share more of myself and my journey, as well as the benefits of yoga and meditation as I see them. So expect stories, sutras, and jokes, because I think I'm pretty funny and laughing is going to help us loosen up. Yoga isn't a game, but there's no reason we can't play. So being playful stops us striving, and we become explorers simply for the pleasure of it. This Yoga Pose podcast episode is sponsored by Consciousness. And that's brought to you by Consciousness because I went to a Science of Consciousness event by Dr. Daniel Bohr, and he is a neuroscientist at Cambridge as well as an author. He was speaking as part of a Funzing event, Funzing. You should Google them because they host loads of amazing events around the country. You just buy a ticket to something like this, which was a talk in a pub. And I mean, it's one of the only ways to get me into a pub is to offer me information where I can make notes. They also do walks and like craft activities, and they're well worth checking out. And a few months ago, Dr. Daniel Bohr, I'd bought a ticket. He was in Brighton, giving a talk and explaining consciousness from a scientific perspective. He made reference to the philosophical, so Descartes said that consciousness is independent of the object. He was saying how religions represent consciousness as the soul and that it's something mysterious, and how scientists have been able to see consciousness in the brain. It's a physical process, and I saw that using fMRI scans. So we can all agree, whichever leaning you take, that consciousness exists. Even if we experience it differently, whether that's spiritually or scientifically, and, it's beyond the scope of this podcast to worry about those details. One of the many things I took from the talk was how consciousness affects performance. And this is what gives these podcasts so much value. So I go off and do all these things, take my little notebook to a pub in Brighton, looking like a super dweeb. I study and, my brain lights up as I think of ways to communicate what I've learned with you. And these things only have value when they're shared. Dr. Daniel Bohr very generously gave his time to explain his life's work to us that night. And then I receive all these teachings, this information, and it blows my mind. And I can do two things with that. I can hold that and kind of selfishly grip onto it, or I can do my little part and share what I learned with the over 6,000 people who've downloaded this podcast. So now you have two ways that you can go with this. You can kind of selfishly hold on to whatever it is that you're enjoying about these episodes, or you can do your part. You can share this episode through social media, through texting your friends, through putting it on, for your partner to listen to and then leaving the room if that's the only way you're going to get them to participate and enjoy these episodes. I would really, really appreciate it if you could help me out. So please leave a review. Do share the podcast link or connect with me on social media. It is Do Your Own Thing. And I'm going to pause the episode. I'm going to chill for a few moments whilst I contemplate and manifest. Imagine these, I'm not going to say 6,000 people. I'm going to say 5,000 people. So 1,000 of you, don't worry, I'll get you next time. 5,000 of you, why not? be nice, share this, because you're taking part in this transmission of knowledge and information, and it helps. So I'm going to go quiet for a few moments whilst you help me out. Did you do it? Did you help? Did you share something? If you did, thank you. If you did take those moments to share this podcast, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Fellow yoga teachers and self-employed people often ask me what marketing strategies work best. And what I've found most successful, and without a doubt, is it's people. It's supportive people recommending my work to others every single time. I'm actually a terrible salesperson. I've never had a job where I had to sell. Or is that true? No, I did a bit of retail work while I was at university. And I was meant to invite customers to get a store card. And I couldn't do it. I was... they'd be buying their jeans or whatever. Like, do you want a store card? I mean, this is pointless. You don't want to hear it. I don't want to say it. Let's move on. I was so miserable there that, on my break, I'd drink a litre of chocolate soy milk. So I don't do sales because of that experience. And what I've always been good at is sharing what I know and connecting people. So that's what we've done today. Thank you so much. I really like Dr. Daniel Bohr's work because he's on a real mission to make consciousness more widely understood. He sees consciousness as the citadel for our senses and the melting pot of thoughts. And he is explaining how consciousness plays a role in our performance. He described a study done on a group of professional golfers and a group of amateurs. They played their round of golf, which was the control, so just played as normal, went through the course, and just recorded how they performed. And then the next time these two groups went off and played their round, they wore a little earpiece, which played beeps intermittently. And the results showed that the amateurs played a lot worse when there were beeps. No surprise there, right? But the professionals performed better under those conditions. So how can that be? Well, if you're already an expert in something, you'll perform better when you're distracted. Think of the tremendous amount of concentration needed to learn a new skill. How it absorbs all of your attention as you learn to coordinate movements. When something is novel, you need consciousness, which is why the beeps improve performance for professional golfers and silence improve performance for amateurs. I was just thinking about this and I wonder if there could be like a form of doping in sports where, naughty athletes wear an earpiece to distract them. That'd be fun to see. So this is why being a beginner at yoga and meditation is super exciting. Everything is novel and you're so present in your practice. Advanced, and I'm using air quotes there which don't translate over podcast, but advanced practitioners will benefit from a beginner's mindset. And this is because we excel in what's called the chunking process. And that's where humans identify and store grouped up information. And through chunking, we compress a great deal of redundant information and we isolate what's essential to store in the limited space of our working memory. So tying shoes. I remember as a kid, I had a wooden cutout of a shoe with holes in so that I could practice lacing and tying them up. I'm not boasting, but I can now tie my shoes without thinking over, under, round. And my brain has chunked that initially complex web of movements. So I'm no longer conscious when I do it. Most of the time, I don't actually tie my shoes, I just tread on them because my shoes are on and off all day long. But if you ask me to tie someone else's shoes or tie them using my non-dominant hand, then I may well be quite conscious in that process. Yoga postures can largely be carried out through chunking. I see that often in students who've been practicing for years. They kind of go through the motions of a sun salutation. And that could be okay if the student has chunked well when they first learned the movement pattern. So they've chunked well because the movement is safe and efficient. However, some styles of yoga are tremendously repetitive. They're very fast flowing and there is not time to chunk movement patterns well. And I've found that in my own practice and certainly when I'm teaching. Fortunately, though, traditional ways of moving are now being replaced with the far superior somatic awareness and functional movement. So as teachers and practitioners ourselves, we get to deconstruct old, chunked movement patterns of, say, like a downward facing dog. And then we learn to chunk, so create a new movement pattern in a much more nuanced way. Teachers that parrot their teachers or old lineage are not conscious, and the irony of ironies is that they are not very flexible in their approach to teaching. They recite the same thing to students regardless of the bodies that they're presented with, and rehearse scripts that are given to them in their teacher trainings. So I've got better at teaching because some things I've chunked very well, like how to set up mats in busy studios to make the best use of the space, and how to talk people into basic postures safely. So that means to keep myself and others conscious, I might need to explain more subtle actions of postures, for example. Now, I'm not sure where I'm going with all of this and how to make this relevant to life as well as yoga, but I guess I can conclude by posing a few questions. So what is useful to chunk? What movements or habits do you have that really serve you? And by contrast, are there things that you've chunked that don't particularly serve you at this point? Do you find yourself going through the motions? And does it really matter if you do? I don't know, but given that consciousness exists, spiritually, physically, that both scientists and philosophers study it, it does make sense to develop our consciousness. Thank you so much for listening to Yoga Pose. Thank you so much for listening to the Yoga Pose podcast. If you're interested in improving your karma for this life and the next, the single easiest way is to leave a review for this podcast and to share this episode on your social media channels. For VIP Next Life status, also tag and connect with me. Do your Om thing. Thank you so much for listening to Yoga Pose.